Kim. It is so great to get to meet up with you today. I'm so thankful that Access Child Neurology brought us together to chat for just a bit about returning back to school and what that means for children and families who have a child with some type of neurological health concern. Um, I'm Andrea Tanner, and I've been a school nurse for the last 2 decades. Have worked with a lot of different children with a lot of different neurological health concerns. And I'm really excited to talk with you today and learn a little bit more about parent concerns, especially when it's time to return to school.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrea. I'm Kim Hendry. I have a daughter with cerebral palsy, and so going back to school is always a concern. You never know what's going to happen day in and day out, and so there are just so many things to take into consideration. And I know I always want my daughter to be supported. I want her to be safe. I want her to be a part of a community. And so I'm excited to talk to you today to see a little bit more about what I can do to help support my daughter at school to help her be safe. So, what do you think are some of the most important things that I can do or parents can do to help their kids as the school year gets started?
The first thing that comes to mind is having some type of written plan in place. And this plan can take a lot of different forms depending on what the health concerns are, what the school needs are, but it usually starts with having something in writing. And depending on if the child needs medication, that may include what medications the child will need at school, when the child needs to take those. Depending on the school requirements, there may be certain forms that have to be filled out so those medications can be given. If there's certain procedures that need to take place at school, we may need special paperwork filled out for those procedures. And sometimes it's not a specific procedure, it's not a specific medication, it's not something that we even need documentation from a healthcare provider for, but maybe it's just some step-by-step action plans from you that you know work best for your child. Because as school nurses and as a school healthcare team, we want to make sure that we take the very best care of your child and keep your child safe, healthy, and ready to learn.
Yeah, I know with my daughter, you know, I had to coordinate with the nurse as to when we were running out of medication at school. And, because it's not, especially with controlled substances, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes because you can only fill them so many days in advance. So, counting and making sure we're accurate on that medication and making sure she has enough. I know our school nurse is wonderful about just shooting us an email or giving us a call when we got, close. She would say, "We're going to run out on Friday or we're going to run out on this day." So that communication was super, super helpful. Um, can you talk a little bit about the difference between taking a controlled substance at school versus just any old medication? Like if the nurse wants to give my child, ibuprofen or something like that, um, do those have the same requirements, I guess, as controlled substances? Because I know that can be a tricky area.
Sure, and that is a great question. And it does get even trickier because that may vary by school district, or even by state. I know in the school system where I work, all medications are really treated the same, whether it's a Tylenol or an Advil as needed for headaches, or whether it is a controlled substance. We're going to have the same exact paperwork filled out no matter what. And it will have to be signed by a healthcare provider. But I know some schools and districts are different, and they may say, you know what, we keep Tylenol and Advil on hand all the time, and we'll give that just with your written consent, and we don't need an order from a healthcare provider. So it's always really important to find out from your child's specific school what the necessary documentation is going to be. And something else that popped into mind too was how many pills or how much of that medication can we have on hand at one time. For some
Mhm.
schools, it may be that we can have a week supply at a time and expect you to send in another week's worth every Monday. For some, you can hand over the whole pill bottle with 30 pills in it, and that's acceptable. So that's another good question to ask
Mm.
your school nurse or the school healthcare team to find out what the requirements are as far as those medications, who can bring them in, if we have extras at the end of the year, who can send them home or pick them up. Those are all good questions to work out with the school nurse too. And I know we've run into issues even with my own child of pharmacies not having some of the medications on hand right
Yes,
now. And
yes.
so we've had to really plan early to make sure we
Mhm.
can get a hold of their medication, because the last time we tried to get their medication, it took 5 different pharmacies before we found a pharmacy that had their medication in stock. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is plan early for medications.
Yeah, and the other thing that we do too that I think has been really, really helpful is we involve everyone on my daughter's team. So, like, it's not just the teacher, it's also, other people that may come into contact with her. So, the gym teacher, the, art teacher, the office staff, like, janitors, like they're constantly roaming the hallways. And so it's nice. Like, one of the things that we do is we give the school a really quick snapshot of our daughter. So it says things that trigger her, or things that, can make her feel better, or what are some signs that she is ill, because every child has their own signs that you can see they're really starting to not feel well. So I always make sure I circulate that to everyone, or ask that the school circulate that to all the people that may touch, my daughter in one way or another throughout the school year.
Definitely. And that is a great way to start communication with the school nurse as well. And I should probably even back up just a little bit and say, for some, they may not have the luxury of having a school nurse that works in their child's school. So that's always a great question to ask at the beginning of the school year is, does this school have a school nurse this year? Because that may have even changed since last year. So ask that question. Does the school have a school nurse? And if not, who's going to be providing care for my child in the absence of a school nurse? Is a school nurse here all day, every day?
Mhm.
Or is the school nurse just here one day a week? And who's taking care of my child the other days of the week? And I also want to thank you for
Mhm.
bringing up that you can communicate with all these different school team members, because you're absolutely right. Sometimes we forget about the fact that our children go to special classes. They're not just with one
Yeah.
teacher all day, every day. They go
Yeah.
around to a lot of different areas in the school building, and that can be meaningful to keep in mind when we're planning care, that there's a lot of different environments that students go to, even at the elementary level. And then as they go on to middle school and high school, where they may be transitioning between 7, 8, or more
Yes.
classes and
All the
classrooms during the
classes.
school day, that's a lot of different people to coordinate. So I highly encourage families to touch base with the school nurse if there is one at that school, and make sure that you can communicate with all those different parties, because that makes a pretty large team of people that come in contact with your child.
Yeah, and the other thing too that we've done, thinking of all the people that come into contact with a child, is we talk to the other students. So, like, her friends, people in her class, because, you know, if she were to have a seizure, or if, she has behaviors, or whatnot, we want people to be able to recognize that, and to be able to alert their teacher if they're little, or if they're, an older child, to be able to help in some way, so that, you know she's not in a really dangerous situation, she's taken care of, and also that she doesn't hurt someone else in the environment, or just so that the other students can feel comfortable. They know what's going to happen, they know what their part is, or how to help in one of those situations, because they might not experience this every day, or they might not encounter a child like mine. And I think it's really important just to involve them. We've read books. We've used resources from different advocacy organizations, because they have, a lot of advocacy organizations offer support to schools to teach them, about the condition, or different strategies they can use to help the child be successful at school. So there's just like so many different opportunities to educate children and adults alike in the school environment.
Absolutely. And I love the idea of making sure that you can educate as many people as possible during this process. And what a wonderful and perfect opportunity to teach other students
Yeah,
about different health conditions and how to communicate and work with children that may be different than themselves so that they
absolutely.
can become comfortable with that. And I think one of my favorite times as a school nurse is when I can go into a classroom and read a story to the students, answer their questions, and especially if the students on board and their families on board and give me permission to do that. It is such a beautiful moment to let that student shine as the expert that day on what we're talking about. They can talk about their condition with their classmates if they'd like to. Tell them what to do if they see them doing this or acting this way, and they might need some help, that their friends, their peers can be their helper to get an adult's attention. There's
Yes.
great books out there to help start those conversations that school nurses, parents, students, teachers can read to a class. And it doesn't just work at the elementary level. A lot of times we do that at the elementary level, but we've used similar strategies at the middle and high school levels as well. And I think it's meaningful at every age level for students
Absolutely.
to get to advocate in that way if they so choose.
Absolutely. And there's sometimes too, I think we have to consider what your child individually wants. I know there were some years where my daughter was so happy to get up and talk. And as she got older, it was like, Mom, can you just have the teacher tell the class what's up? And that's okay. That's totally okay. It's, kids
Totally
go
normal developmental stage.
yeah, kids go through just different stages, and sometimes they're totally comfortable talking about it, and it could just be day to day too. Their thoughts on it will change, and so it's really cool to just be able to take your lead or take the lead from your child as to what they want. I know my daughter has just changed her mind. Sometimes she's very open with people, and other times she's like, please don't notice, the brace on my leg or that kind of a thing. That also brings me to, when to even contact the nurse. Because there are times, sometimes my daughter has taken medication, sometimes she's needed help with medical equipment and that sort of a thing. But then there are other times where we've just needed help as far as behaviors go. And I know her school nurse, like, sometimes would step in. And since she has that positive relationship with her, it's really nice to lean on her sometimes instead of the classroom teacher. She could just kind of step in and be that calming voice. So do you recommend to let the nurse know at times for you know when she needs like help and assistance with different things like
Yeah.
that when it's not just medication?
I think it is always a great idea to stay in close communication with the school nurse, and you bring up some great opportunities for that. There may be days where it's just a rough day and you want somebody at the school to know, hey, heads up, we just woke up and things were just not right. If my child needs anything, like, here's what to expect, and here's what I hope for. And the school nurse can certainly help with that. It may just be taking that FYI in and knowing that if I see that student later in the day, I've had a heads up of what might be going on. It might be that as a school nurse, I say, you know what? I'm gonna look at your child's schedule. I'm gonna see when they have a free moment, and I'm just gonna pop in and make sure everything's going okay, or do a check-in moment, or send them a note and invite them to the health office to see me for a moment and make sure everything's going okay. So those are awesome opportunities to connect with the school nurse and allow the school nurse to have a glimpse into what might be going on in that day.
Absolutely. There are so many opportunities, I think, to interact with the nurses and all of the teachers and all the staff that work with your child. Um, Anything else we should know about communicating with a nurse at school?
Well, I think that something else I'd like to bring up is just making sure the school nurse is a part of any team meetings. If your child has an IEP, if your child has a Section 504 plan, make sure that the school nurse has been invited to that meeting. Sometimes we get left off those invitation lists, and it's really important to have the voice of the school nurse there. And sometimes it's not our voice, sometimes it's just our ears and our eyes to take in information because we trust you as the expert for your child's needs and your child's experience. And we want to hear what you have to say in those meetings. And then there are times where we may want to speak up and say, hey, and so I want to make sure that school nurses do get invited to those meetings, and you as a parent can speak up and say, hey, I noticed that the school nurse wasn't on the list of invited people. Can I make sure that the school nurse is there too? Um,
Yeah,
because
that's a
that's
great
really
idea. I know
important.
we always update the school nurse too after doctor's appointments. So if something new
Yes,
comes up, or even if it's a medication change that happens at our house, but it's not at school, I still let them
yes,
know because that could be indicative of, you know, maybe there are serious side effects and I need the nurse or the
yes.
teacher to communicate with me about what's
Mhm.
happening with my child in the classroom because I'm not there. And unfortunately, you can't just wait till the weekends to give your child a new medication. Like you have to
Yes.
start right away, and that is a school day. And so you want to make sure that there's someone that has eyes on the child and is able to communicate that back to the parents so that we can be knowledgeable and know what we need to do on our end with the doctor and that communication with our doctor to get things properly adjusted.
That is a huge help. And I see that as one of the amazing roles that the school nurse can play in assisting students and their families is ensuring that care coordination process, making sure that the healthcare team and the school team and the home team, everybody is on the same page. Everybody's aware of what's going on when changes are made. When there's a change in a medication or procedure or a strategy, we can all be looking to see, hey, did it work? Did it not work? Are things better? Are they worse? Are we seeing a change? So that is one really great role that the school nurse can help with is making sure that that triangle of communication is staying on point. And the school nurse can also be a leader in making sure that the school team, whether it be the teachers, the assistants, the bus drivers, cafeteria, office staff, everyone is aware of what they need to know in case they
Absolutely.
encounter your child, whether it be noticing a problem or just knowing ways that we can recognize and acknowledge a good job, making
Yeah,
sure that everybody knows their role. And especially if there's a need for identifying an emergency situation and knowing how to respond, making sure that we've been able to get that written plan in place and not just
mhm,
have the written plan, but practice the written plan and,
right,
and know that everybody knows their role and can take action appropriately if that
yeah,
emergency moment arises. Um,
including I love how you
and
said
and then
transportation too, like busing.
yes,
We have to think about
yes,
all those people. I mean, there are times when your child is, you know, with a bunch of other kids on the bus, and then what happens if they have a seizure on the bus? What happens if they need medical
mhm,
attention on the bus? What are some of the strategies? Maybe the child sits closer to the front of the bus instead of being in the back so that the bus driver can get to them faster or that kind of a thing. So I think it's really awesome that you mentioned that because I think we forget about, you know, transportation. We forget about these hidden times when our kids are other places, not just at school. You know, there's field trips.
mhm.
There are tons of other things that you have to problem solve around
Yes,
that come up in school, and it's totally
yes,
okay. It's great. We want them to do everything that all the other kids are doing and be an active member at school.
mhm.
But we also want to keep them safe. And
Absolutely. And I
everybody's
think
doing
that brings up
everything they can.
another great point is what the child does after school. Like if your child is
Oh,
going to stay after school for any special activities, or I know in our school system, we have an after school program, and an
mhm.
outside agency comes into the school to provide
Yes,
that after school care. But a lot of times parents aren't sure, like, hey, if they're coming to the school, does the school make sure they
right.
know about my child's health condition or
Yeah,
not? And so we have to be really careful in making sure parents know when that outside agency comes in, we're not passing on the school
yeah,
plan to them. They're going to need their own plan, they're going to need their own communication with you as a family.
yes.
Um, So that's a good thing for families to keep in mind as well at the beginning of each school year, is recognizing that after school care program may not know about my child, and I need to make sure
Right.
they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got to think about their whole entire day. Everything that's going on, for sure. Absolutely.
Definitely.
All
Definitely.
right. Well, it was so
Was there anything
lovely
else?
talking. I don't think so. It was so lovely talking to you. I'm glad we have this opportunity um, for on Access Child Neurology, and I think this is just going to give a lot of people a lot of great information that we can think about and utilize, because there are so many things in a child's day that you do have to think about, and um, nurses are just a wonderful part of the school if you have one. If not, I know sometimes office staff take care of nursing duties, but regardless, I think just having that team relationship at school is
I
really important. It's the best way to keep our kids safe, happy, healthy.
I couldn't agree more. And school nurses, we are so excited to link arms with parents, as well as the healthcare team and the school team, to make sure of that very thing, that your child is healthy, safe, ready to learn, and have a successful school year. And I hope the very best for you and your child in this next school year, Kim.
Thank you. You as well. I'm excited for it to
Thank you.
begin.
Yes, indeed. It's going to be here before we know it, or in our case, we've already been in school for a few weeks.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So you're off and running.
We are off and running, but it's going great. And I hope the same for you all.
Thank you. Have a wonderful year.
You too. Thank you.